Hello and good afternoon. Today's video tutorial will be a sort of a CCNA level, maybe get into the CCNP level a little bit, but mostly a CCNA level tutorial on the Cisco Catalyst switching line, specifically the 2960, and we're going to do the demonstration on a 3750. So there'll be some minor differences, but what we want to do is we want to take a look at the Switch Database Manager. And this is something that you'd be surprised how many, not just junior, but senior network engineers are unaware of the Switch Database Manager and the functionality that it can provide to a 2960 switch. And again, I'll be demonstrating over here, and we're going to be doing the demonstration on, I don't actually have a 2960, I have some 2950s, but unfortunately they do not support some of the things I'm going to try to show you here. So this is a Cisco 3750, not a 3750X, just a regular 3750, and I'm running 12255 SE6, and it's the IP services version, not the IP base. So real quickly, right, the Switch Database Manager, what it allows you to do is provide different templates for the switch that you're using. And if I were to simply type show SDM prefer, this is going to go ahead and show me the current template. And you can see here it says the current template is the desktop default template. So we're currently using, and we'll talk about the aggregation template as opposed to the desktop template. So we're concerned about the desktop template. And what the Switch Database Manager does is it allows you to carve up the TCAM, or the Ternary Content Addressable Memory, to have it do more of what you might be, what your use case may be. So if you're using it as only a layer 2 switch and you're not doing any kind of routing, then there's a template for that. If you wanted to enable IPv6, then there's also a template for that. And so that was really sort of how this topic actually came about. Is we had a switch that it was a 2960. It was running 12.2.35, I believe, and we had upgraded all the other switches, and then this guy was a straggler who was missed, and a student of mine was trying to configure an IPv6 address onto a VLAN and was unable to do so because of the fact that the Switch Database Manager template, in addition to the version of software, didn't support the dual IPv6, IPv4, and IPv6 feature set. So let's take a look here. If I were to type in show SDM and question mark, you can see that we have prefer. And then if I do a question mark again, it's going to show me the templates that are available for me to pick from. So if I wanted to use an access template, we could do that. And this is for access layer bias. The default is for default bias. And then here's the dual IPv4 and IPv6. Because today, if you're using a 2960, the hope is that you've got the 15.x code loaded on there. And you would want to be able to practice your configuring of IPv4 and IPv6 addresses. And so what we're going to see here is you're unable to get IPv6 configuration to work without enabling this template right here. And this is the same template that you're going to see, or the name is the same as it is on the 2960. And then you also have a routing, which is for routing. And so if you were to do a search on understanding database templates, and we're using 12.2.55 code. Oops, give it a second here. There we go. So understanding templates, and we've got the 12.2.55 code. We'll change this to 150%, make it a little smaller. So there we go. So on the 3750, it tells you that to allocate ternary content addressable memory resources for different usages, the switch SDM templates prioritize those system resources. So the access is an access template. Oh, I'm sorry, I said for the access layer, but it's access control lists to accommodate large numbers of ACLs. So if you know on your 2960 that you're going to have a bunch of ACLs, then you would want to apply the access template. The default template simply gives a balance to all functions, right? And that's the template that the switches typically ship with and that they typically have. And so, as you can see here, the default template for IPv4 max security ACEs, and what that stands for is access control entries, right? We could have 1,000. So 1,000 would be the max here. And we're going to see in a second how you can actually run the show SDM prefer command to see what it would look like. So if I were to type in access, this is going to show me what the database, the Switch Database Manager, what that template would look like if applied. And you can see here that when we set it to access, we double the number of access lists. So if you had 1,300 access lists and you needed to put those onto your 2960, and in this case right here we're looking again at a 3750, you would use the access template because the default template only gives you 1,000. So let's walk through these. If I wanted to do the dual IPv4, IPv6, right, you have 3 choices. Again, default, so the default is going to look like this. And you can see here we only get 500 security access lists. However, we now have IPv6 capabilities, right? So the TCAM is now carved up to provide IPv6 storage space. If I wanted to do IPv6, the dual stack, and the dual stands for dual stack, the routing template would look like this, right? So it's a little different than the default template that we displayed up here. And then if I knew that it was only going to be a layer 2 switch and there was going to be no layer 3 at all, I could just simply do VLAN. So if it was an access layer switch, I could, and I knew it was going to be only layer 2, because you can see what happens here is in terms of doing static routes, number of IPv4 unicast routes is 0. It doesn't support any. Directly connected IPv6 addresses, none. Unicast routes, none. So again, this would be for pure layer 2. And so again, you've got some options here, and this is one of the things that a lot of network admins are unaware of with respect to the capabilities of some of their switches. All right, so we've taken a look at how you can view the templates, or specifically what the settings for the templates will be. If I come over here, you can see that on the 3750, and this is on the 3750, I'm not sure that this applies to the 2960, specifically not the 2960s we're using. It talks about the 3750 12S, and you'll notice there's desktop templates and aggregator templates. Well, for the 3750 I'm using, there is a 3750 model, which is right here on the top. And I believe that's the 12S right there. And the reason that they call it, you can see here, access and aggregation, is it's SFP connections. So typically, you won't have servers connecting in direct to the switch with fiber. You would typically have other switches at your access layer tying into your core distro aggregation layer. So it basically is an aggregation point for uplink connections. Now that's not to say that you couldn't put a what the part number is GLCT, which would allow you to plug in an RJ45, Cat5, Cat6 Ethernet cable. However, you typically wouldn't purchase this switch with the plan to use it with GLCT optics, right, or connectors. So that's why they call it an aggregation switch. And when that switch on the 12S is used, you have aggregator templates that you can also use here. And so again, come down to the IPv4, IPv6. So it's dual. It's because it's dual stack, right? You're basically enabling the dual stack functionality on the switch. And so here are some templates for the support. You can see the dual desktop default, the routing template, the dual stack template, the VLAN template, and you've got the aggregator default template, and then there's an aggregator routing template and an aggregator VLAN template when you're doing the dual stack. And so to see what you're using, you just type show SDM prefer, And so what if I were to try to configure IPv6 unicast routing, and I'm on a platform that supports that with an iOS that supports it? You'll notice when I hit enter, I get an error message. In fact, if I type IPv6 question mark, it doesn't even recognize the IPv6 command. And again, the reason for that is we're using the default Switch Database Manager template, again, and it's only IPv4 right now, so we don't even have IPv6 capabilities enabled. So again, 2960 and the 3750, you would want to go ahead and enable those features and that functionality if that's something that you wanted to use. So SDM Prefer, if I do the question mark, you can see here, do I want to do the access for ACLs, the default, which is what we're using right now, or dual stack? Well, if I'm a CCNA student, if you look at any of the workbooks from the Introduction to Networks course to the Routing and Switching course, Routing and Switching Essentials course, you'll see that the workbooks are always calling out the fact that the 2960s that you're using should be running the 15.0 code. And so, again, the student that ran into the issue just this past week, when I had asked him, I said, oh yeah, have you enabled, have you done anything with your IPv6 unicast routing? Are you sure that you have everything set up right? And he did. However, again, it was just running 12.2.35 code and didn't have the Switch Database Manager set up. So we upgraded him to the 15.0 code, and he was able to go ahead and move on and continue his work with IPv6. So we're going to say dual stack, right? So we want IPv4 and IPv6, and we could do default. Again, over here on the tables, we can take a look. We're the desktop templates, right? Because we are not a 3750-12S. So as you can see here, if I do the default, it gives me a listing of how the table is going to be carved up. We could do the routing, right? So let's go ahead and do the routing. All right, and that's it. And you're going to get a message here. It's going to tell you that changes to the running SDM have been stored but can't take effect until the next reload. So in fact, if I were to type end, and then let's do a quick, we'll do a quick write mem, that what we're going to see here, if I type show SDM Prefer, and it's a pretty nice little warning here that's going to tell you that this is the template that you're using, right, the desktop default, and on the next reload, the template will be desktop IPv4 and IPv6 routing template. All right, so let's go ahead and let's do a reload here. And we're going to let the 3750 reload. So while that's reloading, I'm going to jump over here, and these guys have 4 connections between or actually, I think 8 connections between them. So on switch 2, right, which is also exactly the same, 3750, 12.2.55, and if I do a show SDM Prefer on this guy, and I've already made the adjustments here, we can see that I'm using the desktop IPv4 and IPv6 routing template. And so switch 2 had the command run to change the SDM template, and then it was already reloaded. So if you take a look here, you can see that number of unicast MAC addresses, 1.5. So 1,500 number of IPv4 IGMP groups, and it also has the IPv6 multicast groups, right? So you can see that now dual stack has been enabled on this switch. So now, if I were to come down here and type in config T and say IPv6 with a question mark, you can see that we have a whole host of options to choose from. Now, again, I'm on a 3750, which is a multi-layer switch, right? So you can see we've got the unicast routing option here. In the course, in the class that I teach, the student was basically just trying to assign an IPv6 address to a VLAN interface, so it was VLAN 1, I believe, and IPv6, so you can see now we can actually assign an address. So if I were to say 2001 DB8 ACAD we'll say 100 10 /64. I could even do an IPv6 FE80 10, and we'll do a link, forgot my address command in there, IPv6 address, FE80, so I'll put a link local on here, :10, and then link local. right? And so now these commands work, whereas before we invoke the SDM prefer command and change the Switch Database Manager template over to the dual stack IPv4 and IPv6. These commands didn't work prior to that. And so now these commands work. So again, I would highly recommend the 15.0 branch of code on your 2960s, as well as enabling dual stack, especially if you're a CCNA student studying to get that CCNA and looking to make changes and practice those commands that are going to be required. And so again, if you were to do a search for, and I did my search on 3750 with the version of code and the Switch Database Manager, if we were to pull this up and say Cisco 2960 15.0 Switch Database Manager, and let's see what we get. So here we go right here, configuring SDM templates. And so this is going to be part of a larger book. We'll just take a look at this chapter right here as a PDF. And again, it's always nice to read the release notes as well as the documentation, because this is typically where you find a lot of the what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of the intricacies of what is supported, what's not supported, how are things carved up. And so I'm back on Switch 1 over here. We'll let this PDF load here. It's taking its time. So back on Switch 1, which has completed its reboot. So if I do a show SDM prefer, you can see now that the current desktop template is the desktop IPv4 and IPv6 routing, so the dual stack. And now if I go ahead and go into global config mode, and then we'll go into interface VLAN 1, just like the Switch 2, you can see that now, now I can go ahead and I can assign IP addresses. In fact, at the global config prompt, if I type IPv6, you can see now that, again, we have a whole host of options. So I could say IPv6 unicast routing. And so now I've turned on IPv6 unicast routing. Again, this is a 3750 multi-layer switch with IP services. And so here's a nice document, Chapter 8, again, on the 2960. And it talks about the, let's see if it talks about the release. Saw the 12.255 SE. And so LAN-based routing template is supported only on the 2960 and the 2960S. With 12.255 SE or later, and only with the LAN base image, right? But you can see here that it makes, it's going to make accommodations for IPv6 as well. And so there's the default template, the dual stack template, where you can see that we now have IPv6 space allocated in the TCAM table. And then it's, again, just like the 3750, it's going to talk about switch stacks, the default templates. Whoops. There's a LAN-based routing template. And so on the 2960, this is what you will see. You're going to see an option for default, which is obviously the default. You have your dual IPv4, IPv6, and there's a LAN-based routing. So it supports configuring unicast routes for static routing on SVIs, or switch virtual interfaces. And then you have the QoS template, which is going to maximize your system resources for quality of service access control entries. All right, so hopefully this has shed some light. If you're on a 2960 in your class and you type show SDM prefer and you don't see the dual stack enabled, or if you type show version on your 2960 and it comes up with 12.2, I believe it was 35. It might have been 25, but I would definitely check. If you've got 12.2, 25 or 35, you're definitely going to want to upgrade to at least 12.255 on your 2960. I would highly recommend the 15.0 branch of code, because that is, again, what all the workbooks are based on. So take a look at your 2960 in your course and see what you're running. And that should give you a good idea as to whether or not you're going to have dual stack capabilities on your Cisco switch. All right, so I hope that you have found this video tutorial helpful. Again, you'd be surprised how many people don't really know about the Switch Database Manager and the features and functionalities that are there. If you're in the Routing and Switching Essentials text, if you go, I think it's page 269, right around page 269, there's actually a really nice section in there that talks about the Switch Database Manager. In fact, I believe it starts on where is it at here? Yeah, I believe it starts on 266 or 267 in the Routing and Switching Essentials text. And you can do some routing with a 2960. You can do static routes with a 2960, right? Typically, you'll hear people say, oh, well, it's a 2960, you can't do routing. And really what they're trying to say is it's a 2960, you can't do OSPF or EIGRP or BGP, so you can't use routing protocols. However, you can do static routes on a 2960, right? And we just saw how to do that. We just saw how to manipulate the TCAM to maximize that switch for some static routing, if that's what you wanted to use it for. And now that I've said that, Cisco has come out with a new switch called, I think it's the 2960XR. And that switch does allow you to do some routing with routing protocols, I believe. Let's take a quick peek here. 60 XR. And there's the 2960 XR. And I believe you can do stub functionality. So if you were doing OSPF or EIGRP, you could use it as a stub router. And let's take a look at the software release notes or the configuration guides to see. And we'll take a look at, actually let's take a look at the reference guides here. And it's got the command references. And as you can see, LAN switching, network management, IP multicast, systems management, and we're looking for routing in here. And let me see if I see routing in here. Security guide, multicast, so it does multicast. Interfaces and hardware, high availability, multi-technology, consolidated platform, LAN switching, VLANs, layer 2. Yeah, I don't see the layer 3 in here. I know it's in here. Let me take a look at the switch command reference, and let's see if it's got any OSPF commands in here or EIGRP commands. But yeah, the 2960 XR is relatively new. I wouldn't say, here we go, layer 2, layer 3, layer 2, layer 3 commands. And boy, the Cisco site is running slow today. All right, so let's come down. Layer 2, layer 3 commands, channel group. And we're not interested in that. Let's do a quick search here for OSPF, no. EIGRP, no. Routing. Only one mention of routing. Yeah, so I'd have to go back and find a different reference that's going to point that out. But it should have, let me do a different search here. So 2960 XR OSPF support. Switch routing configuration guide. All right, so let's see if we can find, yeah, so how to configure OSPF. So here we go. So it's got OSPF information, and again, this is, go back up to the top here. This is the 2960 XR switch routing configuration guide. So here we go. So this is a good one, how to configure IP routing, Unicast, OSPF, EIGRP, right? Configuration examples for EIGRP as well as OSPF. And so you can configure these. You can actually even do policy-based routing, PBR, as well on the 2960 XR. And let's take a look information about EIGRP. So it gives you some information, and it's stub routing, right? So it allows you to set it up as a stub. So it gives you limited EIGRP functionality with the 2960XR. All right, so this wraps up this video tutorial on the Cisco Switch Database Manager and how you can really squeeze a lot more feature and functionality out of a 2960, as well as you just saw here, a 3750. And check your platform and check your release notes to find out if the Switch Database Manager is relative to the switches that you're working with, and you may be surprised at some of the features and functionalities that you have that you just don't know about. All right, have a great day.